What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be ranking all of the full-time NASCAR Cup Series drivers from worst to best. There were 33 drivers that declared full-time for the NASCAR Cup Series that declared basically for points at the beginning of this year, and I'm going to go from 33rd to 1st and tell you why those drivers are in their current positions. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. Starting off in the 33rd position, we have Quinn Health. Quinn Health scored 0 top 5s, 0 wins, 0 top 10s, no lap sled, and his average finish was a 31.3 this season. I think Quinn Health's most memorable moment of this year was the Texas wreck. Other than that, Quinn Health really didn't do much. He wasn't honestly terrible, but Landon Cassidy did better in this ride. I think Quinn Health honestly should have done a little bit better than he did. He kind of downgraded this team just a little bit, and I expect a little more from Quinn Health. That being said, he does have a chance to improve. He's only 23 years old, so he definitely can improve next year. But if he doesn't improve next year, he's probably going to be out of a ride or going back to extending your trucks. I think he shouldn't have jumped up the Cup as quick as he did in 2019. I think he was fully ready for 2020. That being said, I think he can improve next year, but he's going to have to improve here in 2021. Up next in the 32nd position, we have Brennan Poole. Brennan Poole did end up missing one race earlier this year. I believe it was at Bristol, if I'm not mistaken. He scored no top 5s, but did score 1 top 10, led 4 laps, and he has a 29.5 place average finish. Not a bad average finish. He drove for Premium Motorsports and then it moved over to Whitworth Racing, but usually Brennan Poole was outperforming the equipment this year that he was given. I think Brennan Poole does have a lot of talent. I think his career kind of got screwed over due to the whole DC Solar situation. That's what kind of affected his opportunity to do better in his NASCAR career when he drove for Chip Ganassi. But that being said, Brennan Poole had a decent year. I expected him to kind of finish around where he finished in the points. He did get above 30 place average finish, which is really, really good. Actually, under 30 place average finish. When you're under that for a small team like that, that is really, really, really good. I know it's the second worst of drivers, but the fact that he finished 32nd and giving praise to Brennan Poole, that is a lot of support toward Brennan Poole. Up next, in the number 31 position, we have the 96 car Gun Brothers Racing's driver, Daniel Soares. Daniel Soares had 0 top 5s, 0 top 10s, but he did lead 20 laps, and he had a 26.6 place average finish. Now, Daniel Soares did miss the Daytona 500 due to a wreck because of miscommunication from, I believe, the Fords, if I'm not mistaken, and Soares was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Soares had no control over that. Daniel Soares usually was outperforming the equipment just a little bit. He wasn't like completely outperforming the equipment, finished like 20th or 25th. But on a lot of weeks, he was finishing in the top 30. And I think only had 1 DNF, if I'm not mistaken, in all the races he ran this year. I believe only had 1 DNF. So that really isn't bad for Daniel Soares. Now, like I said, he is going to be going to Trackhouse Racing for the 2021 season. So there are a little bit hopes high. Hopefully he can improve next year. But not a bad year for Daniel Soares. I mean, his average finish is only 10 positions worse than Stewart Haas race. So that really isn't terrible for a small team like that. Let's see what Daniel Soares does next year at Trackhouse. Up next in the 30th position, we have Corey Lejoy. Corey Lejoy got no top 5s, 0 wins. He did get a top 10 earlier this year. He led 13 laps and had a 25.6 place average finish, which is kind of about where he finished last year in the points. It was a little bit better of an average. I think it was like a 0.2 better average finish than he did last year. Corey Lejoy definitely had a few sparking moments this year. Most memorable moment for him, though, was definitely the Denny Hamlin and Corey Lejoy feud earlier this year. That was very fun to watch. Corey Lejoy definitely outperformed the equipment at times this year. He's really good at Martinsville, and at Daytona, he got his only top 10. But it seems like he was kind of around the top 20, top 25 range on a week-to-week basis. It's just that the problem was they had like engine problems and fueling problems, which cost them better points position than they probably were going to get. That being said, I don't know where he's going next year at the moment. Hopefully, he does better next year and gets a better opportunity because I think Go Fast Racing, while they're not a terrible team, they weren't a great team, and I think it kind of affected Corey Lejoy's performance. That being said, he comes in 30th on my list. Up next in the number 29 position, we have Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece this year scored 0 top 5s. He did get 2 top 10s, however. He got 12 laps led and a 24.3 average finish. His most memorable moment, if we're going to be honest, is the really bad wreck at Kansas. But I looked up at his stats, especially in the second half this year in the playoffs, and honestly, they were overall pretty good. He only had 2 finishes outside the top 25, so he on a consistent basis was kind of around that top 15, top 20 range on a week-to-week basis. And I think that's one of the reasons why he is returning to G. Doherty next year. Ryan Preece does have a lot of talent. Again, I think he kind of had a disappointing first half year. That's what kind of affected his opportunities. I think at one point, 3 straight races where he finished last. Hopefully he can improve that next year. But Ryan Preece comes in number 29 on my list. Up next in the number 28 position, we got Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth scored 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, 13 laps led, and had a 21.4 average finish. Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth, I thought, was going to be a lot better than he was. He didn't score like an F grade season, but he got a D grade season. He had a few good moments this year. He had a second place finish at Indianapolis, and he did have a few good runs at Pocono, pretty good runs at Pocono, and got a top 10 at Darlington, that kind of saved the season. But other than that, Matt Kenseth was just nowhere to be found this year. I thought Matt Kenseth was eventually going to get acclimated to these cars. Again, I think them not having any practice or qualifying to get used to these cars, I think kind of affected him. Because when he did qualify, especially for like the Coke 600, he was a top 5 car. Again, I don't think those Chip Ganassi cars are generally the fastest cars on a racetrack. That being said, Matt Kenseth I thought was going to do a lot better this year, and he kind of just was disappointing. I think a lot of his fans are kind of glad he's not coming back next year because it was a very disappointing year for Matt Kenseth fans. And including myself, I'm a huge Matt Kenseth fan. It really, really sucks seeing him come back because I thought at least he'd be in contention more for wins this year. But he really wasn't in contention this year. He just completely struggled. He just had a bad year. It was not a good year for Matt Kenseth. Up next in the 27th position, we had John Hunter Nemechek. John Nemechek scored 0 top 5s, but he did have 3 top 10s this year. He led 1 lap, and he had a 22.4 place average finish. John Nemechek was either running pretty well or either wrecking. He had a lot of wrecks this year. I think he was overdriving the cars a lot this year, and I think that's why he ended up finishing this low in the points. At one point, he was contending for a top 20 in the points earlier this year. He was overachieving the cars at the beginning of this year. But as season gone on, there was jokes going around about him being like a wrecker on a week-to-week basis. It seemed like he was the one rookie that was really, really wrecking on a week-to-week basis. I think John Hunter does have a lot of talent and a lot of capabilities, but I think he's overperforming in those cars. He's overdriving the cars a lot. I think that's why he's crashing too much. Hopefully next year when he comes back to front row, he does finish better than this because, man, he had just had a disappointing year. And not disappointing year, but he could have honestly done better because at one point he was running for the Rookie of the Year this year and just it didn't come in. He did have an impressive run at Darlington, but other than that, kind of just bleak year for John Hunter. I expect a little more from him. Up next in the 26th position, we have Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon scored 1 top 5, got 2 top 10s. He led 13 laps. He had a 22.0 average finish, so a 22nd place average finish. Ty Dillon this year had kind of a good year for himself. I know it wasn't like a top 10, top 15 year for that team, but there were times where they were contending for top 10s and top 15s, It is a shame that Germain Racing is going to be shutting down at the end of this year because I honestly think with Ty Dillon, they could have improved throughout the upcoming season. Hopefully, next year, wherever he ends up going, he does end up finishing better than he did. Hopefully, he does end up doing a little bit better. But Ty Dillon, he had a good few months, and he ended up getting a stage win earlier this year. I thought that was really, really impressive and really cool to see. But hopefully next year, Ty Dillon can improve himself in his gamemanship and continue to get better as drivers. I think if he has more time and continues to be with these teams, I think he will get better as a driver. Up next in the 25th position, we have Rocket Man Ryan Newman. Ryan Newman this year got 0 top 5s, had 2 top 10s. He had 35 laps led this year and he had a 20th place average finish. I think his most notable moment was his horrifying Daytona wreck. It was a terrible, terrible wreck. He had a few good moments this year. Other than that, that was a really bad moment, but he had a few good moments this year, but really he just was out there driving around. I think his head injury kind of affected him this year. He wasn't the same Ryan Newman we've seen in the past, but it was great to see Ryan Newman back in the car. He missed 3 races earlier this year. I honestly think if he would have been in those 3 races and got those other 2 or 3 races that he missed, I think he got in some pretty decent points in those races. That being said, I think Ryan Newman does have a lot of capabilities to maybe in his final year next year get better. So I think this will be next year will be his last year. So hopefully Ryan Newman can improve next year and finish better in the points than 25th. But again, I also think the Roush cars kind of were not as good this year. I think that's why Ryan Newman finished 25th in the points this year. Up next in the 24th position in the rankings, we have Ricky Senhouse Jr. Ricky Senhouse Jr. scored 3 top 5s this year. He had 4 top 10s, led 68 laps. He had a 22.6 place average finish. I honestly think, not counting the restrictor super speedway races, his most impressive moment, if we're going to be honest, is his top 5 in the second Charlotte race on that Thursday evening. That was really, really impressive to watch from Ricky Senhouse Jr. He was up front in the majority of the race, was contending for the top 5, and he looked really, really fast in the race. And I think he also got top 5 or top 10 at Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. At one point, he was contending for the plus. But one of the big problems with Ricky Senhouse Jr., he overdrives the cars. Similar to John or Nemechek, I think he has a lot of talent, and he showed it in some of these runs he had. But the thing with Ricky Senhouse Jr. is he overdrives the cars, and he did it all about where he finished last year in the points of Roush, which isn't too bad if we're going to be honest, but hopefully next year when he does come back, he'll improve and contend for top 20 in points. It looked like it was going to be like that early in the year, but unfortunately, as the year went on, he kind of fell off in the second half of the year. That being said, 24 for my rankings. That's too bad, not too bad for a JT Doherty Racing driver. Up next, finishing 23rd in my rankings, we have Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell scored 0 top 5s this year, but he had 4 top 10s, led 6 laps, and had a 20.9 place average finish. Front Row Motorsports took a major step forward, and one of the biggest keys is Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell had a huge improvement this year. He was consistently more of a top 15 and more of a top 20 driver on a week-to-week basis. I think a lot of people are going to remember his most iconic moment, or most non-iconic moment, being when he took out Bubba Walls in the All-Star race. Yeah, that was a bad moment for Michael McDowell. That being said, I think it took a major step forward this year. Probably had a career year for himself, and a career year for himself at Front Row Motorsports. Hopefully next year, Front Row Motorsports can't continue to improve, and Michael McDowell can have a contention to go off for top 20s in the points. But he had a decent year, and not a bad year for Michael McDowell. Up next, finishing in 22nd on my list, we have Bubba Walls. Bubba Walls only scored 1 top 5 this year, did not get a win this year, became close at times, had 5 top 10s, led 14 laps, and had a 21.1 average finish. Bubba Walls, in my opinion, outperformed the cars that were given to him this year. Honestly, I think he had some pretty strong runs this year, especially on short tracks and definitely on the other tracks like super speedways. I thought he had some pretty good runs earlier this year. I think everyone knows about the other situations. I'm not going to bring up. Bubba Walls has brought a lot of fans into the sport and has become a superstar, not just inside the car, but outside the car as well. And with Bubba Walls going to 23XI Racing, I think the future is set in stall for Bubba Walls. And like I said, I think he outperformed this cars at points. He was at one point in contention to make the NASCAR playoffs. He was doing that well. And I think it helped that the RCR and RPM were working together at the time. And RCR this year took major steps forward. And that same thing could be said for Bubba Walls. And Bubba Walls took a lot of major steps in his NASCAR career up to this point. Up next, in the 21st position on my rankings, we've got Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher had 2 top 5s this year, scored 8 top 10s, led 33 laps, and had a 19.6 average finish. I'm going to be a little bit honest. I was a little bit disappointed in Chris Buescher's season. He did have a few really good moments. Unfortunately, the end of the year kind of did not go his way. He had 2 really bad finishes in the last 3 races. He did have some good runs this year. He did really well at Daytona, and earlier he was in contention for the playoffs. But really, the Roush cars took kind of a step back, and I think that kind of affected Chris Buescher's performance. That being said, I think he was one of the biggest disappointments in the 2020 season. Hopefully next year, he will have a shot at making the playoffs, because I think those cars might have an opportunity of getting better, but he's going to have to take a major step forward next year, because I think next year for him is a contract year, if I'm not mistaken. So Chris Buescher needs to take a major step forward, but not a bad year, but kind of a disappointing year for Chris Buescher. Up next, in the number 20 position, we have Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell scored 2 top 5s this year, had 7 top 10s. He led 18 laps and had a 20.2 average finish. I think a lot of people are going to say that Christopher Bell had a disappointing year, because I think a lot of people, including myself, expected him to win a race this year or win 2 races this year at Lejoy Family Racing. I think the fact that practice or qualifying did not come into play for him, especially since he never has really driven a car that's like 550 horsepower package, I think that really kind of affected him this year. I think he could honestly had a better year. But as the year went on and the more time he got in the car, he definitely took a major step forward and at points was contending for a NASCAR playoff spot. And I was looking at some of the tracks as we got closer to the playoffs, and I saw he had a shot to win races. And honestly, that Texas race just recently really helped him this year. He took a major step forward at Texas, almost won that race, but JJR was super fast at Texas Motor Speedway. Hopefully, Christopher Bellman goes to Joe Gibbs Racing. He makes the playoffs next year, and hopefully he will continue to take major steps forward next season. Up next in 19th position, we have Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick this year scored 3 top 5s this year, had 9 top 10s. He had 30 laps led this year and a 17.5 average finish. Tyler Reddick was honestly, for me, the most impressive rookie of all the rookies this year. Many, many times, he would run the top 10, run top 5 as well. At Phoenix, he was in second place. I mean, I think he had like a sponsor for like second place or something like that on the car, which that was really, really funny to see. Tyler Reddick, in my opinion, is one of the most talented NASCAR drivers that has come up to the ranks over the last couple of years. And I think he will carry RCR along with Austin Dillon to the future of the sport. Tyler Reddick, in my opinion, did a really, really good job this year. I know he didn't make the playoffs this year, and the second half didn't go as well. That being said, Tyler Reddick had a pretty good year this year, and hopefully he can take major steps forward in the 2021 season. Up next, the final rookie on my list in 18th position, we have Cole Custer. Cole Custer scored 1 win this year coming at Kentucky International Speedway. Only scored 2 top 5s, had 7 top 10s, had 5 laps led, and a 19.2 average finish. I'm going to be honest, other than his win and some really strong runs, I'll be very honest with you guys. I was a little bit disappointed in Cole Custer this year. I thought Cole Custer was going to kind of take it a little bit more. I know that win in Kentucky was impressive. He had a really good run at Indianapolis. And he had some good runs in the playoffs as well. I think in the second half of the year, he kind of started getting together. But I expected him to win not because of a late restart. I expected to win off of speed alone. I think he has some good runs, like I mentioned, but I expect a little more from him. That being said, I think with him having more time in the car, I think next year he will take major steps forward, and he will be a contender for the playoffs once again. Hopefully, he improves next year. Up next in the 17th position on our list, we've got one of the greatest NASCAR drivers, or the greatest NASCAR driver of all time. You can take it if you will. Jimmie Johnson. Jimmie Johnson scored 5 top 5s this year, had 10 top 10s, had 107 laps led, and a 17.3 average finish. Jimmie Johnson was this close to making the playoffs this year. He almost made the playoffs, but for Jimmie Johnson, it was just so disappointing not to see him have all the fan affair. Again, COVID-19 kind of affected that, but the fans not being around to see Jimmie Johnson, that kind of really hurt him in his chance this year. I mean, look at Darlington. Looking back at Darlington, he could have honestly won that. He kind of choked that race away. The disqualification kind of hurt him this year. But at the end, and the COVID-19 as well, kind of making him sit out for one race and then just crashing out Daytona didn't really help. But there were moments where I saw Jimmie Johnson back at his form once again. I think he had the best speed he's had since 2017. He showed that at times this year. But unfortunately for Jimmie Johnson, what kind of hurt him this year, it's just I think he wasn't as confident this year. He showed some confidence for sure. But that being said, Jimmie Johnson ended this year off with a bang, getting a top 5, finishing the best of the non-championship 4 drivers, and his victory salute to the fans and him and Chase Elliott basically passing the torch. I thought that was one of the coolest moments in NASCAR history. And I cannot wait to see what Jimmie Johnson does in IndyCar. I know at the end of the year, kind of disappointing for Jimmie Johnson. I really thought he was going to win this year. That being said, the ending for him was really cool to see him get a top 5 and really cool to see what he did this year, and he's 17th on my list. Up next in the 16th position, we have the first of the full JGR cars, Erik Jones. Erik Jones scored 9 top 5s this year, had 13 top 10s. He led 65 laps and a 15.9 average finish. Either Erik Jones is up front or crashing. Basically the truth of Erik Jones' season. It was really the problem with Erik Jones is that his speed could have gotten him into plus, and at times it's better than guys like Kyle Busch, Trex Jr., and even Denny Ham at times. The problem with Erik Jones, he had a lot of wrecks. Some that were his fault, others, situations, not as much. I think Erik Jones will do all right when he goes to Rich Petty Motorsports, but again, for Erik Jones, was a disappointing year. I really thought he was going to win and definitely make the playoffs this year. He came this close. I think it was actually like 30, 40 points outside of making the playoffs this year, but showed a time, especially at Daytona, where he really was up front. And at times this year, he had a lot of good speed. But unfortunately, the thing that really affected Erik Jones was, again, just not having enough chances of winning races and just crashing out a lot of races is really what killed Erik Jones' season, and that's why he is this low on this list. Up next in the 15th position on my rankings, we've got Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon did score one win this year at Texas Speedway, had 4 top 5s, had 9 top 10s. He led 135 laps. He had a 16.2 average finish. Austin Dillon, in my opinion, had probably his best career season up to date. His win at Texas could technically be called a fluke, but in my opinion, it was a strategy call between him and Tyler Reddick and RCR because tires really didn't matter at Texas Motor Speedway. But I think the most impressive thing about his season really was, again, he did miss one race due to COVID-19, but I imagine if he was in the race, he probably would have gotten the top 10 because that 3-car was extremely fast at Daytona Road Course. Austin Dillon had an incredible round of 16. We almost won it on the race. Would have finished 4 had Chase Elliott and Mark Jr. had not had their problems in that race. Basically took each other out of them having a chance to win and almost won that race. Then we go to Richmond and holy crap, they had probably the best race I have seen out of Austin Dillon ever. I know those wins, you could say argue are the best, but the fact that Austin Dillon was up front and not really falling back and finishing the top 5 in that race, that was really impressive. That's what really got him through the round of 16. I know Bristol didn't go great for him, but he did really, really well in the round of 16. Fortunately, round of 12 kind of where it ended, but for him, had a career year, and because of that, he's top 15 driver on my list. Up next in the 14th position on my list, we've got Matt Benedetto. Matt Benedetto this year scored 3 top 5s, had 11 top 10s, had 91 laps. He had a 14.8 average finish. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed in Matty D this year. I expected Matty D to be contending for more wins this year than he did. He did have a few strong runs, contended for both wins in Vegas, almost won Talladega, and he was up front in some races, especially second half of the year. I think he did take major steps forward. But that is a Penske-affiliated car. Now, Wood Brothers is not as good as Team Penske. Let's just make that fact clear. That being said, I did expect more from Matt Benedetto because especially coming close to playoffs, he was this close to not making the playoffs. He was just falling down, and he was really, really good. It was like 100 points above the cutoff line. And then we come to the last race, and he's like 15 points above the cutoff line. I mean, that's what happened to Matt Benedetto. Just had no momentum. But then the playoffs came around. They kind of turned it around, and that's what really kept him an opportunity to stay at Wood Brothers for the 2021 season. For him next year, it's a make-or-break year because he will not be returning to Wood Brothers in 2022. Hopefully, he can improve on his 2020 stats. Up next in the 13th position, we have got William Byrne. William Byrne ended up finally, after 2 or 3 years, finally ended up scoring a win this year at Daytona International Speedway. Had 4 top 5s, had 14 top 10s. He led 140 laps. He had a 16.2 average finish. William Byrne, for the most part, for the first half of the year, was just not that good. He really didn't have a top 5. And then Dover came around in the second Dover race and had a top 5 performance like we had never seen. He was on the verge of not making the playoffs this year, but that win in Daytona kind of helped. And he had, honestly, a pretty good playoff run. At Daytona Road Course, got a top 10. That was pretty good again. That's one thing that could help William Byrne in this upcoming season, as he will be joined by Rudy Fiegel later this year. William Byrne had kind of a disappointing year, like 16.8 average finish. Not the best for William Byrne, the weakest of the 100 cars, if we're going to be honest. That being said, he did finally get a win, and I think that really helps his ranking on this list. And hopefully next year, he can improve as a driver. Up next, in the number 12 position, we've got Clint Boya. Clint Boya scored 2 top 5s this year, had 12 top 10s. He led 280 laps. He had a 14.7 average finish. Clint Boya just had a typical Clint Boya season, running around the 12th, 10th, 8th to 12th range most of the year. He did have a few good performances. I remember the second Darlington race where he almost won that, and lost some laps in Michigan, and had a good run at Daytona Road Course. Other than that, though, Boya really didn't do much this past year. He really didn't do too much this past year. Hopefully, he'll do well in the Fox Sports Group, and hopefully this isn't the last we see Clint. But if it's the last we see Clint, man, Clint, you almost went out with a bang, had a top 15 performance. Not great, but not fantastic. I think you underperform in these cars this year at times. That being said, Clint Boya did have some good moments, and he is 12th on my list. Up next in the 11th position on my rankings, we have got Aric Almirola. Aric Almirola had 6 top 5s this year, had 18 top 10s, led 305 laps, and had a 13.3 average finish. I know the random draws help Aric Almirola in his starting positions, but if you look at Aric Almirola logically, he had a career year on everything except he did not win a race this year. He came close at times to winning races. I was wondering when he was finally going to get that first win in 2 years. It did not happen this year. But at points, Aric Almirola showed me that he had the capabilities and had the speed. After that Homestead top 5, he just went on a tear. He just started picking up a lot of consistent performances and one of the most improved drivers from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. I had him going in the round of 8 this year just because Eric Amarola looked like a top 8 car. But as we got to the end of the year, he kind of tapered off. Still was consistent, but because he didn't really have a lot of playoff points, that kind of affected him at the end of the day. And that is why Eric Amarola, unfortunately, is as low as he is on this list. And now we have officially reached the top 10 in the rankings. Let's get into it. In my number 10th place, we have got Kirk Bush. Kirk Bush this year scored 1 win at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in a very clutch win. Scored 7 top 5s, had 19 top 10s, led 169 laps, and a 13.4 average finish. Kirk Bush had a typical Kirk Bush year. Scored a win and was really, really consistent. He wasn't as good as some seasons in the past, but usually he was in about 10th to 15th, kind of running the same thing that Ryan Newman was doing in the past, but he did get a win at Las Vegas, which was really, really clutch, and got to the round of 8 this year. There are points where Kirk Bush, I was wondering when he was going to get a win this year, because I don't think those Chip Ganassi cars were as good as they were last year. That being said, I think Kirk Busch could definitely take next year. Probably next year is going to be his last year. Hopefully Kirk Busch will win more races next year, but you look at his consistency, I think that really helped Kirk Busch be pretty well this year, and hopefully he can take major steps forward in the 2021 season. Up next in the number 9 position on my list, we have the other Busch brother, Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch scored 1 win this year, late in the year at Texas Motor Speedway, had 14 top 5s, 20 top 10s. He led 511 laps and a 13.8 average finish. Kyle Busch did not have a typical Kyle Busch year. He just completely was off his game. He wasn't really that good this year, not just in the Cup Series, for the Xfinity Series and Truck Series at times this year. He was getting beat in those series, and that was really, really shocking to see. Kyle Busch, still had a good year. If you look at the numbers for any other driver, they would probably appreciate those numbers. But coming off of a championship that he just won in 2019, Kyle Busch did not have his typical Kyle Busch year. Hopefully in 2021, he definitely can improve as a driver, but for Kyle Busch standards, wasn't great. It was really a question if he really was going to win a race this year, He didn't get past the round of 12 for the first time since 2014, which is the first time a defending champion has not gotten past the round of 12, which is really, really surprising. So hopefully Kyle Busch can take a major steps in improvement next year. Maybe that momentum will start coming back to him after that Texas win, because he had a few good performances late in the year. That being said, Kyle Busch had a disappointing year for himself, but hopefully he'll take major steps forward in the 2021 season. Up next, in the number 8 position, we have got Alex Balman. Alex Balman scored 1 win this year at Auto Club International Speedways, had 6 top 5s, had 15 top 10s, led 440 laps. He had a 14.7 place average finish. Alex Bowman had a pretty good breakout year this year. He didn't win like 4 or 5 races like people thought he was going to do at the beginning of this year. And the summer stretch kind of was not a good part of the year for Alex Bowman. After that hit in the wall at the Charlotte, he kind of fell off. But as we got closer to playoffs, he took it back in the right direction and was more of a consistent driver. Alex Bowman is about where I thought he was going to be, about 8th to 10th most of the year. At points, like I said, he was a championship contender, and he was a threat for the playoffs, for the championship 4 at points this year. Problem was, he didn't score enough playoff points or stage points to kind of really help him get into the Final Four this year. That being said, Alex Bowman had a good year for himself. Hopefully, in 2021, moving over to the 48 car, he can go over to that team and improve as a driver and get a couple more wins next year, because he and Great Valles will be working together again next year. Up next, in the number 7 position, we have Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney only scored 1 win this year at Talladega Superspeedway, had 11 top 5s, had 17 top 10s, led 668 laps, and had a 13.8 average finish. His only win was kind of lucky, and he kind of had to wreck somebody to win that race, if we're going to be honest. He had to put Eric Jones in the wall. Yeah, Ryan Blaney's season was just a lot of bad luck this year. I go back to so many races where Ryan Blaney was consistently up front and leading laps. The worst one was Texas. That one was a burn for him. He had the best car at Texas, and then Todd Gordon decided, let's take 4 tires, even though tires don't matter. And then that killed their strategy because he had the best car in that race. I go back to Vegas, where late race caution comes out. He has to come down pit road. Well, his crew chief tells him he comes down pit road. Up front at Auto Club. Probably second best car behind Alex Bowman in that race. Guess what happens? He literally has a flat tire with 4 or 5 laps to go and loses out on a second place finish. That was disappointing. You see, the thing with Ryan Blaney was early in the year, he was a championship threat. But after that Texas race, he kind of fell off. And in the round of 16, that was just Achilles heel. He had a bad round of 16, couldn't get it together in that round, and just didn't have enough to get through the round of 16. But as the playoffs went on, he just got better, and it's a shame that the round of 16 didn't go back. So I think he could have had a shot at a round of 8 run. That being said, Ryan Blaney still was able to score a win this year, and he is back with that team at least for, I believe, 2 more years. So he can definitely improve in 2020 and 2022. But can he get more wins? 1 win next year, because, again, he's going to have to start winning more races consistently because people are going to question if he is a great driver or not. I think he is, but people are going to be questioning that. Up next in the number 6 spot on my list, we have Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. scored 1 win in the 2020 season, had 14 top 5s, had 23 top 10s, had 950 laps led, and 11.7 average finish. In my honest opinion, Martin Truex Jr., while he did have a downgrade in wins, his consistency was still there. Him and James Small kind of figured things out, especially for a while there. He had a consistency of like 10 or 12 races where he finished like no worse than like 4th or 5th, which was really, really impressive, by the way. Martin Truex Jr., while he didn't get a lot of wins this year, and I guess because him and James Small weren't, because he didn't have like Cole Byrne, which is a big reason why Martin Truex Jr. didn't win as many races. I think it's like the big contributing factor, by the way. Martin Truex Jr. had a lot of strong moments this year and a lot of bumps as well. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to the championship 4 because of a loose field, but he almost made it to championship 4 because everyone had him winning Martinsville. And he got that win in Martinsville, his only win in Martinsville, by the way. I think people are going to look at Martin Truex and say, oh, he just had a bad year for his standards. Martin Truex Jr. still was a good driver. I don't know why people think he had a bad year. He was a consistent, good driver, and I think he was the 6th best driver overall on my list. Up next in the number 5 position on my list, we have Joey Logano. Joey Logano scored 3 wins this year, had 12 top 5s, 21 top 10s, led 939 laps. He had 11.9 average finish. His 3 wins came at Vegas, Phoenix, and at Kansas International Speedway. I personally don't think he should have been in the championship 4. I don't agree with him being in the championship 4. I think he did not deserve to be in there, in my opinion. But Logano was consistent. There were times where he struggled, but there were times he was consistent as well. That being said, Joey Logano did not win the championship. He came this close to winning it, by the way, at Phoenix. Finished 2nd in the championship standings. But overall, he was the 5th best driver overall. I expect a little more from him. Well, didn't expect more. I didn't think Logano was going to make championship 4 just because I didn't feel confident about Logano making because of Kevin Harvick, how good he was being this year. But when he won Kansas, I'm like, he's got a shot because he's good at Phoenix. And he won previously at Phoenix. So if he got to Phoenix, he had a really good shot. So that's why Joey Logano is number 5 on my list. Up next in the 4th position, we have his teammate, Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski scored 4 wins this year, had 13 top 5s. He had 24 top 10s, had 952 laps led. He had a 10.1 average finish. I think a lot of people were really doubting Brad Keselowski because of all the crew chief swaps that Team Penske had earlier this year. Well, that crew chief swap really did not affect Brad Keselowski because, in my honest opinion, Brad Keselowski had one of his quietest, greatest seasons he's ever had. He and Jeremy Bones really gelled together. They've worked together a lot in the past. You look at the 4 wins, he got 3 of them, especially on a 750 horsepower package, and a Coca-Cola 600 win as well. He won at Bristol. He won at the other 2 tracks. Can't remember. Won at Bristol, won at Loudon, and won at Richmond. Those are the other 3 tracks he ended up winning at this year. So Brad Keselowski was really a big threat, and Brad Keselowski we thought was going to be the favorite going into the championship race because if he had the same car that he won at Loudon and Richmond, which Brad was honestly probably the 3rd best driver overall. And Brad had a really strong season overall, and I think he and Jeremy Bones can improve. As Brad will be returning there next year, and we'll see what he does. Will he be returning in 2022 to that team? We'll have to find out what happens there in the future. Up next in the 3rd position on my list, we have 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion and my personal favorite driver until Kyle Larson comes back, Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott this year scored 5 wins. He had 15 top 5s, 22 top 10s, had 1,247 laps led, and 11.7 average finish. The reason I'm not putting him as number 1 on my list is because he was not the best driver overall in the season. That being said, this was overall a career year for Chase Elliott. Like I said, he scored 5 wins this year. 1 at Charlotte International Speedway. He won at Daytona Road Course and also won at Charlotte Roval. Then he won the final 2 races at Martinsville. and he also won the final race at Phoenix to win the Cup Series championship. That is one of the special moments of our sport. But also, I look back at some other races where he honestly could have won this year, I look back at, Vegas where he had a tire beat or something, like get inside the tire and it cut the tire. I look back at, what was the other races? Phoenix, where he had a loose wheel. Look back at the Coke 600 when a caution comes out because his teammate has a problem with 2 or 3 laps to go, and that really affected his chances of winning championships. So if you really look at it, Chase Elliott could have honestly won 8 or 9 races and almost had as many wins as Kevin Harvick and could have been much closer to Kevin Harvick in the points in the regular season points. That being said, Chase Elliott had a career year and had a fantastic year, and he's going to try to go back-to-back for championships, and already one of the favorites going into it because of all the road courses and all the short tracks. And there's more short tracks and road courses on the schedule than there really have ever been. Up next, in the number 2 position on my list, we have got Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin scored a career, I think the second most wins he ever had in a season with 7 victories, had 18 top 5s, 21 top 10s, led 1,083 laps, had a 9.3 average finish. Denny Hamlin, through the most part of the year, was really, really, really good. Then the playoffs came around, and he struggled. That's the only reason he almost didn't make it to the Final Four, and one of the reasons I did not have him winning the championship this year. Denny Hamlin was not good in the playoffs. Regular season was a good thing. Now, he did win at Talladega in the playoffs, and he also did win at 6 other races. Won at Dover, he won Daytona 500, won Homestead. He won 7 races this year, and just won a lot of races this year, and had one of his career seasons. I think the only reason he's not number 1, he just faltered in the playoffs. He just wasn't as good in the playoffs this year and didn't do as good. That being said, Denny Hamlin had a career year, and hopefully in 2021, he can improve on those stats and maybe once again have a chance of going to win the championship or choking the championship like he's done the last 2 years. Well, really didn't choke, just didn't have any speed at Phoenix because he was the 4th quickest. He was the weakest link, but JGR was just not very good at Phoenix. They were just completely awful. And now we have the number 1 driver on my list, and personally should be the champion in real terms. But the champion, the number 1 guy, Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick this year scored a career high for himself, 9 victories, had 20 top 5s, 27 top 10s, led 1,531 laps. He had a 7.3 average finish. Kevin Harvick had a championship level year. He was this close to making the Final Four. This close. He did everything that he could. The only reason that Kevin Harvick, and he only lost by 1 or 2 points, by the way, going into the championship 4, which was the biggest surprise. Kansas, Logano beats him in Arrow. At Texas, it starts raining and misting, and NASCAR doesn't officiate it properly. And then he takes out Kyle Busch, which really killed his opportunity and chances of getting the championship. That being said, you have to look at how good Kevin Harvick's season is. 9 wins. The most wins in a NASCAR season since, I believe, 2013 when Jimmy won 8 races that year. I believe that's the case. He got so many wins in 2020. He was just the best overall this year. It is a shame he couldn't compete for the championship 4. Blame the playoff format, blame NASCAR for having a playoff format that doesn't always reward consistency. Because Kevin Harvick was overall the best driver, in my honest opinion, and I believe that he was the best driver of the 2020 season. So, anyway, that is going to be it for me ranking every single NASCAR Cup Series driver for the 2020 season. What did you think of today's video? Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, turn notifications so you can be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Links description below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What did you think of today's video? Do you think my rankings are completely off or not? Let me know your rankings below in the comments. How would you rank the drivers from the best to the worst? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time. There's going to be a lot more championship videos coming out really soon. More postseason stuff and a lot of stuff for the end of the year. So check that out here on the channel very soon. Anyway, see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.